Good morning. Thank you guys for joining us today for the LHTAC workshop. I'm assuming everyone can hear, and if not, put something in the chat and we'll troubleshoot on our end. This is our virtual workshop. It's our 10th workshop of the year. And again, thank you for joining us. A little about the agenda today. I'll talk about who's speaking on behalf of LHTAC. We'll talk about the LHTAC funding applications, programs that we administer, some technical assistance information, funding outside of LHTAC, the T2 Center, and of course, question and answer. If you'd like to ask questions throughout the presentation, go ahead and drop those in the chat, and then we'll stop at the end of each section for verbal comments and questions. A little about who's speaking today. I will be covering LRIP as well as some general LHTAC information. Scott Wood will be talking about federal aid and bridge technical assistance. Brian Wright will be covering the local highway safety improvement program, as well as trucking information and traffic counters. And Amanda will be talking about the transportation alternatives program and the children pedestrian safety program. A little background on what is LHTAC. We were created by the legislature in 1994. We were created by the legislature and we report to the legislature. We do not report to the governor or to the Idaho Transportation Department. We are a standalone agency. We are governed by a council. The council is made up of 3 city mayors, 3 highway district commissioners, and 3 county commissioners, and their representation is shown on the map. We have folks from all over the state. We do not get to vet or veto commissioners or council members. They come to us from their associations. All that we ask is that they are geographically spread out. Our council meets quarterly, 3 times a year in Boise in our office or at a hotel, as we have been recently, and then in September, our one meeting is on the road. We try to visit different projects in different parts of the state. Next year, we're planning to be in District 1 or 2. Who do we serve? All 287 local entities. That's what we were created to do, is to serve those local jurisdictions, and that's what we do today. So any transportation or roadway related questions from the cities, the counties with road and bridge or highway districts, we hope that they are coming to us. Everything we do falls under the technical assistance umbrella. The training, the T2 program that we have funding programs from the programs we administer, applications, will provide support for your other programs or applications. Technical assistance, we've been doing those tailgate talk emails. Bridge technical assistance, you'll hear a lot about later today from Scott Wood. And then in-house experience. Everyone who works at LHTAC comes from very different backgrounds. We all have different work experience and educational experience, which makes us a good resource for you. What is great is if it's something we can't answer in-house, we can use our relationships to get you the answers or get you the resources you need to move forward. What is new at LHTAC? Quite a bit. We've had quite a few staff changes in the last 6 months. Nawang Sherpa in the bottom left is the person who is answering the phones and providing financial support to LHTAC as an organization. Christy Brooks in the bottom right is doing the financial aid on the federal side. So she's processing and making sure all the federal aid payments go through and keeping our programs balanced. And then Jamie Kuntz is our newest resident engineer who comes to us from ITD District 3. Moving forward to some general knowledge for you guys, the annual Road and Street report has received an update this year. As you may recall, you received one-time funding through the governor's request this spring. You got one-time payments in April. Also moving forward, you will start to receive 4th quarter payments from other new legislation. All of that new state money, even though it comes through the highway distribution account, should be reported on line 16. All other state receipts or transfers. The line-by-line instructions that we post on our website have been updated to show you that. Regarding those quarterly payments and those total distributions, the information is available on the ITD website, and we also link to it from our site. ITD has updated the spreadsheet reporting, or the pieces of paper, PDFs that you can download to see how much you received, and they've color-coded each of those spreadsheets. The first in that yellow-orange color is original highway user revenue. the original HDA money that you've been receiving prior to 2015 through now. So this is gas tax and registration fees only. The blue is the House Bill 312 that was passed in 2015, the new user revenue. So again, this is gas tax and registration fees. The reason it is separate and on a separate sheet is it requires separate reporting. The legislature asked for reporting on this new money, and this is your third page of the annual Road and Street report money. So this is where you will look to see what to report on that page. And then finally in the green is general fund money. So again, this is the third quarter payment you received in April from the Building Idaho's Future request through the governor, the little over 47 million that went out. And then moving forward, you will start to receive fourth quarter payments that is also general fund money, sales tax money. Regarding funding changes, some state funding updates. So as I mentioned, the governor's request for surplus money this past session, the 2021 session, provided over $47 million in surplus funding to local jurisdictions distributed through the highway distribution account. Again, that's what you'll put on line 16. Also passed this last legislative session was House Bill 362. It's the largest transportation infrastructure legislation ever in Idaho. It increases the amount of sales tax for infrastructure projects to 4.5%. Of that 4.5%, the first $80 million is given to ITD for the purpose of bonding projects. The remaining, any amount over the $80 million will be distributed to locals, again, through the highway distribution account formula. For these first 5 years, for sure, that will be a fourth quarter payment. Eventually, as sales tax figures continue to grow, you may start to see payments in the third quarter. But for now, I would look for that money in the fourth quarter. The estimate for this first year looks like it's in the $20 million range. And again, that will be distributed through the highway distribution account. Looking forward to the 2022 session, I'm sure many of you have heard the state is sitting on a rather large surplus, over $1 billion of surplus money. And once again, the governor has been making statements that he will be requesting some of that funding go towards strategic infrastructure projects. What we don't know at this time is how that money will be distributed or what his request will be. Will it be one-time money, again, through the highway distribution account, one-time grant funding, similar to how the local strategic initiatives program worked? Will it be set aside for bridges? These are all questions we don't know. Of course, the governor will make his request in January, and then it moves to the legislature to act on his request and make those decisions. Moving forward to federal funding, the FAST Act, the last transportation bill, expired. The Congress continued it for 1 month. So we have a 1 month extension that we're in right now, which means we get 1 month of our federal funding at a time. That makes it very difficult to do construction projects for sure, to advertise and award construction projects and even move forward on design when we're working with these short or small amounts of money. We are hoping that a new transportation bill will pass in this next year. All the versions and drafts that are floating around out there of the new transportation bill shows a substantial increase to federal funding to the state of Idaho, also an increase to bridge money. The bridge funding looks like it will be directed at either off-system bridges or bridges in poor condition, both of which end up being an increase to local funding for bridges. So we are excited about that bill. Hopefully we make it out of this year with the new bill instead of just continuing resolutions. That has happened in the past where we went a whole fiscal year of continuing resolutions, receiving federal funding at 2-week or 4-week increments throughout the year. Further with federal funding, the Idaho Transportation Board invited us to speak at a workshop that was held last week. It was the policy subcommittee, and it was to discuss federal funding with locals. How much does ITD share of the federal money with the local jurisdictions? We were invited along with representation from the 3 associations, cities, counties, and highway districts, as well as the MPOs. Each one of us gave a presentation on the needs of locals and recommendations on how to update that policy. As that moves forward with the Transportation Board, we will keep you updated on any changes that they make. I'll pause for a minute. Are there any questions on any of the information I just covered? You can unmute yourself if you'd like to ask a question or put it in the chat. Okay, I'll move forward. The first funding program we're going to talk about today is the Local Rural Highway Investment Program, or LRIP. This program is a grant program. It is money that we issue to you, the local agency, to complete your project. It's not federal reimbursement like many of our other programs. The LRIP program is created and governed by an Idaho Transportation Board policy. For many years, our exchange rate on federal funds, that's how the program is funded. We exchange rural federal aid to the state for state money in return. The exchange rate was about 61 cents on the dollar. So for every dollar of federal aid, we got 61 cents of state money back. A couple of years ago, we negotiated an increase to that amount. So our exchange rate is now 80 cents on the dollar, and our maximum that we can exchange is 5 million of federal aid rural money for 4 million in state money back. A very substantial increase to the program. Along with the exchange rate, the board policy also has some program rules that govern. One, the local agency must be collecting local taxes or have alternative funding in their road and bridge account. Your road and bridge account cannot be solely highway distribution account funding. For cities, that normally means property tax, general fund transfers into the road and bridge account. For counties and highway districts, that's usually road and bridge levy or SRS funding for public lands. The LRIP money cannot be used for wages or equipment reimbursement. In other words, you can't pay yourself with the money. If you contribute to the project as grant administration, if your crews complete a project or you use your equipment to complete a project, you can't pay yourself or reimburse yourself for any of that work. That is your contribution to the project. The money can be used to purchase materials, hire a contractor, or in the case of transportation plans, hire a consultant. Which moves to the next one. The funds cannot be used to pay consultants for your construction projects. If you need design work done for your construction projects, you need to pay for that out of pocket through your account, through your road and bridge account. The only exception, again, is for transportation plans. We would like you to hire an expert, a professional, to complete that transportation plan for you. And like with all other funding in the state, you must follow state procurement rules. Because the funding comes from rural federal aid funds, only rural jurisdictions are eligible to apply for LRIP. And the application is scored by members of LHTAC council and staff. There are four main types of projects that are funded through LRIP. The first is construction. About 75% of funds go towards construction projects. Those grants are capped at $100,000. Again, those are normally reconstruction projects or maintenance projects, chip seals, crabs projects, et cetera. Within the construction pot of money is the federal aid match. The council reserves approximately $200,000 a year to help jurisdictions in financial need pay their match on federal aid. To be eligible for federal aid, your project must be scheduled for construction within the next 2 fiscal years, and it is meant to be paid towards your match on federal aid construction, not on design. There's funding for transportation plans, about 15% of the funds. If your agency has never received funding for a transportation plan, you may be eligible for $50,000 grant to help pay for your original transportation plan, your first transportation plan. Also, council now has included transportation plan updates. Those grants are capped at $30,000. To be eligible, your original plan or your most recently funded plan must be 10 years old or older. About 10% of the funds go towards sign projects. Those grants are capped at $30,000 and focused on the MUTCD signs. You can include other signs in your community as long as there are some of those required signs in your application. In the red box, you can see we also fund emergency projects. About $400,000 a year is reserved annually to help pay for your local emergencies. These are emergencies that don't come from the governor or the president, but local emergencies for your agency. Often these are weather related. Recently, we funded one where the area received over 4 inches of rain in 45 minutes and wiped out some culverts and roadways. Those tend to be the type of projects that council awards funding for. If it is a lack of maintenance where you have a bridge and have had multiple bridge inspections recommending improvements or recommending maintenance that hasn't been done and then the bridge fails, council has not looked favorably on those in the past. If you think you have one of these emergencies, I recommend calling me right away. I can help direct you on what to do next. These grants are capped at $100,000 and the application is accepted year round. The application for emergencies is available on our website. It is not in the application packet that you will see with the others, the construction, transportation plan, and signs. The application itself can be found on our website, ltac.org, programs, LRIP. You can download the whole packet or by specific program. Also on the website, underneath the applications are the ineligible list. There are two ways to be ineligible for LRIP. One is if you received a construction grant, construction or federal aid grant last year, you cannot apply for that this year. You cannot receive construction in back-to-back years. Also, the urban jurisdictions are not eligible to apply for LRIP because it is rural money we are exchanging. Regarding the application itself, not much has changed. The one change that I'd like to point out is that council has changed the timing of project completion. In the past, if you received an award, you had 1 year to complete your project, or you needed to submit an extension request to me via email. And it was simple. You sent me an email that said you needed another year and we marked you in our system. Council has changed that. Now you will have 3 fiscal years to complete your project with no communication or extensions required in that time frame. However, at the end of 3 years, if you are not complete, a formal request will be required to go to council. So that is a written and signed letter that will be taken to council for them to approve or deny that request. Really, they're trying to make it easier, not requiring the additional communication throughout those 3 years, and 3 years seems to be plenty of time to complete the heavy majority of those projects. Moving on to the actual applications, I wanted to point out the areas where the most amount of points seem to be lost. On construction, question number 5 asked, do you have a pavement and or sign management program? Have the programs been updated in the past 3 years? If yes, attach a cover page and a couple pages of each document. What this is not is a resolution from your city council saying you have intentions to start a sign management program, or out of a page out of your transportation plan saying that you should or it is recommended to have a pavement and sign management program. What this can be is a couple pages from your iWork, an Excel spreadsheet you keep, handwritten journals, a map you keep on the wall that you take a picture of, but something that shows you do keep track of your assets and the maintenance that's applied, and hopefully are doing some inspection on those assets as well. Question number 6, is your project supported by your transportation plan? And number 7, is it supported by your 5-year capital improvement plan? Those are 2 separate documents. Your transportation plan is the guide for your community on your transportation investments, while your CIP is your list of projects, actual projects or maintenance that you have dedicated funding to over that 5-year period. So 2 separate documents for those questions, question 6 and 7. One comment we've received a lot is if a project is not listed on the CIP because it is not funded, because you're applying for funding, so you don't have funding for it, it's not on the CIP. I strongly recommend that local agencies begin to keep an unfunded list of projects, unfunded priorities. That way you have that support, that the document helps support that the project is a priority for your community. It's an adopted document within your city, county, or highway district. And looking forward, if we do get a lot of money this year through the state surplus or even federal money, you will have a document that supports your project that is adopted by your community. So consider keeping an unfunded list of priorities. Question 8 asks, how many employees participate in the training? This training does not need to be LTAC provided training. It can be any training. One is if you have employees working in the roadway, they should have their first aid CPR card. That counts as 1 class. Also, they should most likely have their flagger certification. So those are 2 classes. Also, we've been sharing a lot of free training from other T2 centers or from federal partners. All you need to get about half the points is for your employees to have 2 classes. So really, there's plenty of time to still get these 2 classes and get about half those points available for this question. And then question 9 is, Have you unsuccessfully submitted for this project? I strongly recommend that if you have, you stay the course, stay with that same project. Don't project hop. When we get the applications, we search our database to see if you're applying for the same project or different project. And council wants to reward you for staying the course and staying with your priority projects. So reapply. On to federal aid match. Those top few questions on the application are yes and no questions. Starting with that first one, on your agency's annual road and street financial report is line 64 in excess of your match request. It says if no, you move on. If yes, you're not eligible. Or if yes, please explain yourself. Explain why your line 64 is more than the match amount. There are a lot of reasons for that to be the case. You may be required to keep 3 to 6 months of reserves in your account for that emergency operating expenses. That could easily be more than the match amount for a project. You may be saving for a project, saving for other federal aid match, saving to purchase equipment. Council does not want to punish you for being good stewards of your money and saving for your future. So you just need to explain on those top 3 yes or no questions if you answer yes to any of them. Provide that explanation back to council. And then question 3 is your project description. Explain the need for the project and your financial need. Explain how you got here. At some point you applied for federal aid. You knew that the requirements would be that you had to pay this match at the time of construction. So what changed? What changed in your agency or organization that caused you to need this federal aid match? Again, federal aid match is meant to be for those who need the financial assistance, who are in financial need. On to transportation plans. Question 3, I sneak into this slide even though it's on multiple applications. Are you involved with an active multi-jurisdictional transportation group? I know most of you are. These meetings exist across the state. So that's easy. That's a yes or no. And then you provide a couple pages of minutes that show you attend. Was your project rated in the top 3 LRIP projects for your group? Again, I know that this is common practice throughout these regional transportation groups. The third part of that, list examples of cooperation with other public-private agencies. So this is missed by a lot of applicants. They don't submit anything for this question. So make sure you don't skip this one. Explain how you work together. Do you guys plow roads for each other? Do a road swap? Do you help each other with staffing in the summer, flagging for each other's construction projects? Do you share equipment? Do you buy materials together? Do you help the school with their plowing? Whatever this may be, just explain how you cooperate with other groups or agencies to be efficient. And then once again, question number 5, have you applied for this project in the past and reapply? So if you've been unsuccessful for a transportation plan, just stay the course, keep on it, and eventually you will get funded. And then on to signs. Moving on to question 7, what % of this project is to replace the warning and or regulatory signs? So again, you need to have some of these signs in your application, but moving on to question 8, it can be more than that. Does your project include any other related signing aspects, safety or other? Almost all signing projects can be defended as safety. So think of that when you're applying for your project. Include your street signs and talk about the safety of the EMS services being able to reach the folks that need the help, or new drivers to the area knowing where to turn. Most signs can be spun as safety. One thing I'd like to mention on signs, we funded every sign application last year and did not use the full 10% of the funding. So I can't say it happens every year, but 2 of the last 3 years, we were able to fund every sign application. Also, I'd recommend not going with the bare minimum on your application. Last year, I saw one application for about $3,500 and another one for $7,000. Definitely include all those signing aspects for your community. Try to get the full grant award and replace all your signs at the one time. Moving on to project closeout. This is the project closeout form. It is simple by design, as this is a grant program with a light touch. We want the closeout to be the same. Basically, you need to explain what your project was, when you were funded, when your project was complete. Did you spend all of the money? And did you follow all state procurement rules? This form needs to be signed by your mayor or chairman, along with some before and after photos to close out the project. But that is it. This is the only form that needs to be completed for LRIP. A couple pictures of example projects. On the left, the South Lake Tahoe Highway District used $100,000 from the grant and then another $117,000 of their own money and resources to pave the road that comes in the back side of their high school. The city of Weiser applied for $30,000 to replace 9 radar-controlled speed limit signs around their school zone. Again, a good example of using safety to expand beyond the bare minimum of a sign project. The city of Moyer Springs was funded for their first transportation plan. This now sets them up to be more successful in other applications through LHTAC. And then Camas County received an emergency grant. They had a fire on Soldier Mountain that destroyed a bridge, and they were able to get $100,000 to replace that bridge through our emergency program. Moving on to the application package needs to be complete. It should have the cover sheet and the signed application pages from the application packet along with the score sheet. I strongly encourage a map in the application so that council members can see where your project is. And then for all of your backup information, all of your supporting documents that you include, put those in the right order behind the application cover sheet and score sheet. I also recommend labeling them all. You know, it can be as simple as taking a Sharpie and just writing number 2 at the top of all the documents that go behind question number 2 or number 8, so that they don't get lost during the assembly of your application, or if council members take them apart to review them in pieces. The council members have over 80 of these to score over Christmas, so you want to make it as easy as possible for them to find all of your answers and make sure you get all the points. For LRIP, we ask for no spiral or permanent binding, and again, we take them apart to scan them, so a staple or a binder clip is perfect. And for the application itself, the original plus 2 hard copies. The due date for LRIP is December 1st. The applications either need to be in our office if you're delivering them by 4 p.m. Mountain Time, local time in Boise, or if you're mailing them from another part of the state, they need to be postmarked by that December 1st date. So the same due date, no matter how they're getting here, but it needs to be December 1st. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. Again, you can drop them in the chat, or if you want to unmute, you can ask a question. I'll give it a minute or two. Okay, if you have questions that come up during the presentation.
Hello?
Go ahead. Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, this is Lynn Barker. I apologize, I got on late to the call, so sorry about that. So are these are for general region-wide transportation plans?
Yeah, so these will be local to your agency, or what I've been trying to encourage more to do is work as a region. So if you're in a county, for example, that has, you know, a couple cities and a couple highway districts to work together for that plan, if you do that, you can apply for more than one and pool the funds to complete the project.
Okay, and I'm just going to apologize to everybody because I'm somewhat new to this group and don't have a lot of history. Maybe Anthony and I can meet later to get me up to date. But the 2 questions I have are for the regional transportation plans, can you submit for mobility and bike infrastructure plan as part of that?
What I require for all transportation plans is that they include some bike and pedestrian considerations, but it shouldn't be just a bike plan. So it would need to be a full transportation plan, but include that aspect of it.
Okay, and then what about complete streets?
Can you say that again?
Complete streets.
Are they eligible?
Can a regional plan, if it includes the mobility, including bicycle infrastructure, can it also include complete streets as part of that plan?
The plan can be for as much or as little as the local agency would work out with their consultant. I would guess if it gets too large, the consultant may push back and want some more money beyond the grant amount. But if you guys are willing to fund that, then that would be fine.
So is the grant to hire a consultant to develop the plan?
Yes.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay. And then I don't know, just this is a question out to the rest of the group. Has there been discussions about moving forward with trying to apply for this grant?
So I think if you're asking for like a regional response, then maybe taking that offline would be better. This is a statewide workshop.
Oh, oops.
That's okay.
Okay.
I'm happy to,
Thanks.
if you and Anthony want to call later, I'm happy to talk through that transportation plan with you though.
Thank you. Awesome. Perfect.
Okay, I'll be turning it over to Scott Wood now to talk about federal aid.
Morning, everyone. My name is Scott Wood. It's not Amanda Lamont as it shows in the video. You'll hear from her later. I'm a federal aid engineer here at LHTAC. Manage the federal aid design program or manage the federal aid design projects. And I'll be talking briefly about our federal aid program this morning. If I can get the slideshow to work. There we go. So the federal aid program is surface transportation funds that we receive here at LHTAC. And our number one job of our LHTAC's role in that is number one, to protect the sponsor. The federal aid process does have a lot of steps involved with it, and we don't want the steps to be avoided, and we don't want the sponsor to have to pay back anything that's non-contributing or isn't allowed. So our number one job here is to protect the sponsor. Specifically, our role is to issue the applications, score applications, present those to the council for recommendation for approval. After the project is started, we go through a consultant selection process that could either be request for proposals or request for information, depending on the project size. After that, we go through the federal aid design process, which can be upwards of 2 years. Typically, we do have to follow a lot of federal regulations, including NEPA process. So there's a lot of agencies involved with that. So we need to make sure that's followed correctly. After that, and the project design is complete and we have all the permits in place, we'll go out to construction bidding through ITD's website and ITD process for that. Once the project is under construction, we do go through the construction monitoring process. We do hire out construction engineer inspectors to monitor the on-field activities of that construction process. And after the project is done, we perform the project closeout. As I mentioned before, all the engineering and design is completed with consultants. We don't do that in-house. We only administer the projects through LHTAC. And all of these federal aid programs do require a local match of 7.34% from the local sponsor. Just going to go into the program a little bit. There are 3 types of federal aid applications. There's our rural bridge, which can be local or off-system bridge. And then there's our urban federal aid program. Our rural federal aid program are used for roadway projects for rehabilitation, reconstruction, sidewalks. And these are for arterial major collectors. This program is eligible to all counties, highway districts, and with urban populations less than 5,000. We typically target projects that are around $2 million. And typically applications for our rural program are accepted every other year. The next one is our bridge federal aid program. This is for the funding and replacement rehabilitation of bridges. FHWA defines a bridge as a structure over 20 feet in length. So this does not qualify for bridges that are under 20 feet in length. Basically, if you're receiving an inspection report for your bridge, then it qualifies for this program. This is for local and off-system bridges, which really only is dependent on the roadway classification. And unlike the rural program, this one's available to all cities, in addition to all counties and highway districts. And as just like the rural program, applications are accepted every other year. Some quick facts on bridges. You always hear about it in the news, the state of our bridges. But Idaho specifically, there are 4,259 bridges in the state of Idaho. And about 2,400 of those are locally owned. They're not on the state system. Interestingly enough, too, ITD counts bridges between 10 and 20 feet on the state system too. So the local bridges are between 10 and 20 feet are not included on that system. LHTAC did go through a process a year or two ago to collect that sort of data. So some of you may have been involved with that. So I think we added about 800 bridges to our inventory of known bridges that are between 10 and 20 feet. And of the local bridges, about 50% of those are over 50 years old. So they're quite aging bridges in our state as well. The next program is our urban fellow aid program. As I mentioned before, the rural program is not eligible to populations over 5,000. This program is set up, LHTAC administers what we call the tween urban populations. That's populations between 5,000 and 50,000. Right now we represent 17 of these urban districts. They're listed in the bottom down there. The other organizations are typically larger urban populations such as Coeur d'Alene, Idaho Falls, Lewiston, Napa, Pocatello, and Boise are represented by their own MPOs. We represent the smaller ones between 5,000 and 50,000. As part of our urban fellow aid program, there are urban transportation plans available, and also we do urban construction as part of that as well. As I mentioned to you before, applications are typically accepted every other year on rural and bridge. Unfortunately, this year, due to stagnant funding over the previous years, and as we all know, the high cost of construction the past few years, our program for the next 5 years is completely full and booked. And we did not feel fair for everyone to fill out applications this year and maybe only accept one or maybe possibly 2 applications. So we're trying to get a little caught up here on our projects. Hopefully we get some more funding this year. And if we do, we will start backfilling some of our existing projects. That doesn't mean you shouldn't be thinking about projects that you want to do. So hopefully maybe next year we can start accepting some more applications. So please keep it in mind. If you have any questions, please reach out to me or ask me now. You can unmute yourself or I can take a chat. I'll give it a minute. Okay. Oops. Up next, we'll have Amanda Lamont to talk about child ped safety.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Get to talk about some programs that actually do have funding this year. So now's a great time to pay attention if you're working on other projects or working on emails. I'm here first to discuss child ped safety. This program may be familiar to you because we are bringing it back for a 3rd round after 2018 and 2019 when the legislature initially funded this program. It was a 2-year program and we hoped to extend it, but the legislature did not extend the program after the sunset in 2019. So there was no funding available last year. However, it is back again for one-time $2 million. If you filled out an application in the past, the application has remained identical to the first 2 years. So if you did submit an application and were not successful, you can just grab it and resubmit. I'll give you a few tips on how to make it better, and hopefully this round you'll be able to get funding. You can get up to $250,000, and every city, county, and highway district is eligible to apply. You can submit 1 application. Last round in 2019, we had 65 applications submitted for almost $13 million. We were only able to award 11 in $2 million for our $2 million that we had available. So obviously it's a really popular program. Lots of people want funding to help improve sidewalks, improve safety for kids getting to school. There's lots of before and after pictures throughout the presentation, so you can get some ideas of what types of projects were funded. A lot of pathways, a lot of sidewalks. And because the program is directly mentions children and pedestrians in the title, we really are looking for projects that improve pedestrian safety for kids. So most of the projects that were funded, we're getting kids to and from school, just because it's the easiest to justify that predominantly children will be impacted by those projects. So because it is really popular and highly competitive, we'll go through some tips. But before I do that, just show some cross section of the state. We did have a nice breakout across the state from the last 2 rounds. If you were successful in getting a project funded with the 2018 or 2019 money, we had a clause in the past that said if you got funding, you couldn't go after a project the following year. But with this one-time money, everyone is now back to being eligible to apply. Some example project types. Like I said, most of the projects are paths and sidewalks. Those tended to be the $250,000 applications that we saw. You could also look at pedestrian crossings, though. That was another common project application we saw. You know, a lot of you guys have state highways that go right through your town with neighborhoods on one side and the schools on the other side, and not a safe way for kids to cross the street. So we did see quite a few applications for the retro reflective flashing beacons or rectangular rapid flashing beacons, RRFBs, and the PHBs, pedestrian hybrid beacons. Those are pretty easy to engineer, don't require a lot of prep work before getting it ready to advertise and construct. So if you don't have a lot of ability to hire an engineer or don't have an engineer on staff, some sign projects are really a good way to go. I know some agencies also did speed flashback signs, you know, just bringing awareness to school zones and getting cars to slow down. So there's a whole range of projects that are eligible. But like I said, and I've got it in yellow down here, most of the successful applications were sidewalks or pathways getting kids to school. So there's 2 ways to spend funding if you are successful. One is to purchase material. You can self-perform the work if you have that ability within your staff. You just cannot reimburse yourself. It just means the funding that you get can go further if you're going to self-perform the work. You can also use the funding to hire a contractor. And as long as you follow state procurement laws, this is a 100% grant. You know, there is no match on this funding. So you'll treat it just like your own local money and go out, design it to your own standards and advertise the project and get it built. Things you cannot use the money for is to reimburse yourself, whether that's salaries, gas, equipment. You cannot use it for project match for any of our other programs we work on at LHTAC. And finally, the biggest one that we saw hiccups with in the past was you cannot use it for engineering through design or construction. So you may have a contract engineer that you use a lot for your projects. You cannot pay them. The plan or the way the legislature wrote this is they want the money all to go toward building projects. So if you do have a pathway that requires some survey or requires design, then the expectation is that your local jurisdiction would pay for that. And that's really your contribution to the match. If you have a sign project and it's just installing signs and no design is required, then that's a way to have a really fully granted project where you don't have to put in any additional funding. Some tips on filling out the application. It has not changed. It's on our website now. If you're looking to fill out an application, that's on our website under programs and child pedestrian safety. But one thing that is missing in the application that we didn't update is there is no question that asks you what you're doing with your project. So do us a favor, do the scorers a favor, and just include a little map and a couple sentences about your project to tell us what you're doing. The questions primarily feature, you know, how are you going to impact children? How are you going to improve safety? And we get a lot of responses that said, this is going to make a big difference in our community. And we are really excited about it, but we really don't have any idea as scorers what the project is. So it'll go a long way toward us understanding what you're trying to do if you have a map and 2 to 3 sentences. There is a question on safety. Just because there isn't a crash or a crash with a pedestrian in the area where you're wanting to do a project doesn't mean that your project won't improve safety. Convince the scorers by discussing things like near misses or speeding. Take pictures of kids walking to school in the shoulder or with cars adjacent to them. Get creative on how you're going to describe that this is a safety improvement. And finally, one of the easiest ways to get points is have 5 great letters of support. We recommend that you even go so far as to write the letters yourself and just ask whoever you're interested in getting letters from to sign it. We know that they're busy. The school districts are busy. The principals are busy. Your police departments are all pulled in so many different directions. It really will help you out in the long run if you just offer to write the letter for them and then have them sign it. Everyone that I've ever asked to do this is thrilled to just have to sign a letter versus draft it themselves. So the timeline for the application, they're available on our website now. They're due electronically to our applications at LHTAC.org website on December 16th. We will work really hard to get them scored and up to our council by the end of January or early February. And as soon as the council approves the rankings, those will go on our website on the Children Pedestrian Safety page. So the hope is that once you're notified that you were successful in early winter in December, or January, February, that you can be bid ready within 90 days and advertise the project in the winter or spring when you will get better bid prices. The longer you wait and once construction season picks up, you all know that construction prices tend to go up because everyone's busy and tied up. The hope is that you build your project over the summer or install your signs and close out the project by December of 22. We only ask for closeout that you submit receipts, whether that's for materials or pay applications for your contractor and before and after pictures. That's all we need for the closeout of this project. And we need it by December so that we can put all that information together and present it to the legislature to show, hey, this is a really successful program. Look how many applications we got. The successful projects all across the state, especially the ones within their area, it's gone a long way toward bringing this program back again in 2021. And the hope is that if we continue to show the success and demand for this program, that we can get this funded in perpetuity. So if we're done by December, we'll have it all ready to go for the next legislative session. At this point, if you have any questions on child ped safety, I'll be happy to answer any questions. Okay, so I'll run into the Transportation Alternatives Program. This is a very similar program to Child Ped, as it's the only other funding in the state for projects that are for bikes and pedestrians. This is a joint ITD and LHTAC program. Prior to 2017, ITD administered the whole program. They managed all of the projects, whether they were on the state highway system or if they were off state highway system. We heard from many of you that you would like to see LHTAC more involved in the projects that were outside of ITD right-of-way. So LHTAC hired me in 2017 from ITD to administer the projects that were outside of state highways. Over the last 4 years, we realized that most of the projects that are funded in this program are off system, outside of ITD right-of-way. So this year, ITD handed over the administration of this program in its entirety to LHTAC. And because of that, we were able to draft a new application. So I'll be going over the application real quick because it has changed from the past. If many of you have filled it out, we saw that often they were 50+ pages long, a lot of effort to fill out. And it's also a lot of effort for us to score 72 or 75 50-page applications. So the hope is that we simplify the level of effort it takes for you guys to put in an application and also make you feel comfortable as a clerk or as a road and bridge supervisor that you can fill it out and don't have to hire an engineer to put in an application. These are your contacts. So across the state, there is some coordination that's required prior to the application deadline. If your project is inside the state highway right-of-way, then you'll reach out to the coordinator listed here for your district. If your project is outside of ITD right-of-way, you'll work with me. And I'm just looking to have a conversation with you. If you're in the districts, often, Ken is really good about this. Many of the districts are, they'll do a site visit with you to walk the project and help you figure out if there's anything you're missing or things you might not have considered for your application to make it stronger. While I can't do site visits across the state in the next 2 months, most of the district coordinators will do it on my behalf. And then I'm also really willing to do a Google Earth drive or flyover. And I've done that many times for you across the state. This is also who you'll be reaching out to. There are 2 forms that are due, just like previous applications, 1 week before the application deadline, and these need to be signed by one of these coordinators. So real quick, before I go too far into TAP, I just want to do a side-by-side comparison of the 2 programs. Since you might have a project in mind within your jurisdiction that you want to get funding for, it'll help you decide which one might be a better fit. So for local match, the Child Ped Safety program is a 100% grant. So there is no match since it's local funds, not federal funds. The Transportation Alternatives program is federally funded, so it does require a standard 7.34% match. The award amount is $250,000 for Child Ped Safety. You can do a bigger project than that. If you have a $300,000 or $400,000 project, you will just be able to pay for up to $250,000 of that with the grant funding, and you'd be responsible for the difference. The same goes for the Transportation Alternatives program, except you get up to $500,000. And one caveat with that is design and construction engineering is an eligible reimbursement part of Transportation Alternatives. Project types are pretty similar. The Transportation Alternatives program is really geared toward getting people to and from work, to and from school, to and from the library, really anything that's a driver of people getting from point A to point B outside of their vehicle. The children pedestrian safety, it's in the title, it really needs to improve children pedestrians. So that's why I highly recommend you do a project that's at or near a school. If you're going to look at a park project, work with me on how to tell the narrative so that you're really proving to the scores that it's a children predominant project. With local funds, there really is no environmental documentation that's required. Really easy check mark there. With TAP, with the federal funding, you will have to go through the full NEPA environmental process. We are looking for things like historic buildings or endangered species. There's a lot more things to consider on the environmental side with federal funds. For local standards, both programs allow you to use the ISPWC or any additives that your agency may have to the ISPWC. Even if your project is within ITD right-of-way, we've been successful at requesting ITD allow us to use the ISPWC standards since the projects are typically outside of the roadway. So you can use your regular city standards for both of these programs. And finally, administration. With Child Ped Safety, it's a very light touch. We work with you to get an agreement and write your check. We do 1 phone call or email in the middle of the summer to say, how are things going? Have you advertised your project yet? Are you going to be able to finish by December? And then just the closeout, we request that documentation. So very minimal work on our end for administering the Child Ped Safety grant. When it comes to federal funds, it'll look a lot like other federal projects and programs that LHTAC administers within our agency. So we'll help you hire a design firm to do the design or do plan reviews if you're going to do the plan yourself. I know many of our agencies do that. Victor does it a lot. So does Idaho Falls and the city of Lewiston. So if you have a staff engineer, you can do that work yourself, and we'll just review it for federal aid compliance. So a little bit more administration on LHTAC's end. You can apply for the same project for both funding sources. If you have one project that's really important and critical to your agency, then submit it for both. And we'll know the results of the Child Ped Safety by the end of January. And it's the same scoring committee for both of these programs. So we'll know which projects are funded for Child Ped Safety before we complete the scoring and selection for TAP. So you'll have flexibility to decide which one you'd rather have if you want to apply for both. So diving into the TAP program, this is a picture from the city of Moscow 2018 project where they basically put in a MSE wall underneath an existing bridge under State Highway 8 going out of town. And they had a bike path that goes for miles on one side of the state highway and multiple miles on the other side. And the TAP program funded a connection underneath the road so they don't have to cross the busy 3 or 4 lane highway. So really successful project. I know Moscow's doing a second project this summer that they're advertising for construction further down this pathway. So it's a good example of project that that's getting people to and from, whether it's school, I think in this case, getting them to the University of Idaho campus, outside of their car. So are we safely getting people to the grocery store and economic drivers and residential outside of their vehicle? Because many users cannot drive for whatever reason. And so we're trying to find a safe transportation facility for them to use, whether it's walking or biking. There is a small amount of money, 5 to 10%, that's allocated for safe routes to school and education projects. That will have a separate application this year. In the past, it was combined with one infrastructure and non-infrastructure application. And this year we pulled them out, and Christy Brooks in our office will be administering that application and that program. And she took that application to a convening of safe routes to school coordinators across the state earlier this month. And that application will be on our website shortly with the same deadline. And I highlighted it here. It's a gut check to say, if your project is going to improve the roadway or in the environment for cars, then this is the wrong program for you. So that's your check to see if this is a good program for your project. Some quick tips on the TAP program. It's federal aid match, so 7.34%. You can get up to $500,000 in grant funds. And like I said before, it includes LHTAC and ITD administration, design, and construction of the project. You must own all of the right-of-way. The reason for that is, if any of you have done right-of-way acquisition, it's really hard to predict how easy or difficult that will be. You know, it could take 6 months or it could take 2 years. I have had a lot of questions lately on permanent easements. You know, for example, if you have an agreement with your next door agency that says, if you get a project, we'll give you an easement. If you can get that in writing and put it as part of your application, we'll count that as you owning the right-of-way. Same with the railroad. You know, it's really unpredictable working with the railroads. It can take 1 to 6 years to get an agreement with them. So if you're applying for this program, make sure you have that agreement in writing. And I'm going to go ahead and throw it out there too. Same with the canal company. If you're crossing the canal, make sure you have something in writing. It is a reimbursement program. So you will pay your designer, you'll pay the contractor in full, and then submit your receipts to ITD for reimbursement to get your 92.66% back. The ITD districts are really quick at processing those. Generally, they take 1 to 3 days to get your money back. So please don't be concerned if you're worried about floating a $200,000 construction payment. You'll be able to get the funding for the 92.66% back fairly quickly. You will advertise these projects. It's the only program that I know of that is federal funds that the local agencies advertise. And the reason for that is because most of these projects use the ISPWC specifications, ITD does not advertise them. So we will work with you to make sure you've got all the federal templates and applications and attachments in your advertising package, but you will advertise these. Davis-Bacon wages do apply, and funding. So normally in a general year, every year, the last 5 years for the FAST Act, we've had $3.5 million available. We go out for applications every other year. So that's generally about $7 million. We will have a little more than that because of project closeouts this cycle. So we're looking at $8 million over mostly 24 and 25, but we have some remnant funding in 23. However, the latest versions of the new transportation bill show this program as at least doubling in size. So we don't know when that's going to happen. Layla talked about it in the beginning of this discussion and presentation, but if that happens, we're looking at $22 million worth of funding available this application cycle. So if you've never filled out an application, or if you're on the fence about whether to go after TAP funding this year, it's a great year to consider it and put in an application, because the program is looking like it'll likely double in size. And finally, the TAP committee scores these applications, and that's 1 member from LHTAC, 1 person from ITD, 1 person from our local nonprofit group. The Idaho Walk Bike has been our partner lately, and then 1 flex person. And the flex score this year will be a transportation planner from the Twin Falls area. So some stats from our last application cycle: we had 72 applications requesting $31 million, and we were able to fund 17 of them. So very popular program. Like I said, it was a 50+ page application. The hope is that with this streamlined application that it will be less of a burden for you. So because we have a new application, I'm going to highlight those, but there is one other change before we go on to the specifics, and that is we are going to allow up to $1 million in applications this year. We're looking for non-scalable projects. projects like a pedestrian tunnel underneath the highway. You know, we've been working with the city of American Falls, trying to get kids from their neighborhood on one side of the 5-lane road to the ball fields on the other. And it's a truck route, you know, trucks moving really fast. And so we've been working with them to try to find ways to get kids safely across the road. In the past, $500,000 wasn't enough to do a tunnel like that or do a pedestrian bridge. So we are allowing agencies to apply for up to $1 million for each application if you're doing a non-scalable project. You can submit 2 applications this cycle, but you will only be awarded 1 per jurisdiction. 2 cycles ago in the applications, we had 2 agencies that got 3 applications each, and that was almost 80% of the funding. And so in order to spread the funding around the state, large agencies, small agencies, and not give some of the jurisdictions that have grant writers on staff too much of the edge, we're limiting each jurisdiction to 1 award. You can still submit 2. You don't know which one's going to do better. And if both of them score really well, we will call you to ask you which one you'd rather have in this cycle. So eligible projects, types of projects that score really well in the past are paths and sidewalks, curb ramps, pedestrian crossings, things like RFBs or pedestrian hybrid beacons. Those are the ones that require cars to stop when they're activated. You can reconstruct existing non-compliant sidewalk. The city of Lapwai has been really successful over the past few application cycles to get funding to replace all of their sidewalk down their main street through town. It was, I think, sidewalk original to the town and was probably harder to walk on the sidewalk than it is, you know, in the grass next to it. We also have been seeing a lot more pedestrian bridges and underpasses applied for. And one more time, I added on here, TAP projects are not for cars. So that's your gut check. Here's an example of a non-scalable project that we're looking for the $1 million grants. This is a rendering for the City of Eagle project that we're probably going to advertise this winter. Obviously, this project was added to the program when you could only have up to $500,000 in funding, but the City of Eagle had heard from their constituents that they really wanted this connection. And so they said, just get it funded and we'll figure out a way to pay for the rest. So it's still predominantly local funds paying for the whole project, but you know, they started piecemealing different types of grant funding and mashing it together. So I know they've gotten CDBG funds, they've gotten funding through their TMA, through Compass, and about half of it is federally funded at this point, and the other half is local dollars. Because $500,000 doesn't buy as much as it used to buy, you know, 5-10 years ago, that we saw a need for increasing the limit to $1 million, especially for these bigger types of projects that you can't build half a bridge, you have to build it all at once. So you can submit 2 applications. We're not restricting what type. You can submit 2 $1 million applications or 2 $500,000 applications. It's up to you and what your jurisdiction's needs are. So because the application did change, I'm going to go through the 10 questions and give you some tips on how to be successful. Question 1 is provide a map clearly showing your project limits. It's, you know, the most important part, and it wasn't on our last application, to make us understand where your project is and what the limits are. You know, I'd read a narrative and it would say, we're going to pave Joe's Corner and we're going to put a pathway in there. And I would put it into Google and couldn't find it. So because none of us are as familiar with the area as you are, help us really clearly define where the project is. It does not have to be fancy. You can print out Google Maps and draw on it with permanent marker. The #1 scoring application in 2020 was for the city of Potlatch, and the clerk filled it out. And it was very low tech. You know, it was printing it out, you know, and drawing on it with a permanent marker. But as long as the content is there and you can describe the project, that's really your best bet to get funding. Question 2 is about right-of-way, and it's pass-fail. So if you don't own the right-of-way, we're going to decline to score the rest of the program and work with you to help you understand what you need to get for right-of-way. If you filled out this form in the past and you weren't successful in getting a TAP project, we assume you still own the right-of-way, so you don't need to get it filled out again. You can simply just update the date and resubmit. Question 3 is all about the railroad. You know, make sure you have an agreement with the rail that owns the track, not who leases the track. We had a project 2 years ago where the local agency thought they had something in writing. They showed it to us, and we had already designed the Ped Bridge and the pathway before we realized that their agreement was with the rail that leased the track, not owned it. And so once we went to UPRR, who owned the track, not only did they not agree to allow this pathway to go through there, they said they wanted to close 2 or 3 other crossings in their agency. So we had to totally redesign the project and start over from square one. So it's really important to know who owns the track. And I have, you don't want it to derail your project. I know it doesn't land as well when it's not live, but pun intended, make sure you've got your railroad agreements in place. Question 4 is the highest point question. Out of 100 points, this question is a quarter of it. And it's really where you sell the project to the scorers. You know, why is this going to impact your community? How is it going to enhance users? You know, I think we give you a whole page to describe it. So use pictures here. Pictures tell 1,000 words a lot. You know, help us understand why this project is more important than all the other ones that we've read and scored. Question 5 gives you a little bonus if you have a transportation plan. I know our LRIP program has funded a lot of agencies in the past, and we're getting down to just a couple agencies that don't have a transportation plan. You even get bonus points if your plan is newer, but if you have time between now and the deadline for this project, make sure that your transportation plan includes this project. You know, if you need to take it to your agency, your council, or commissioners to adopt, re-adopt your transportation plan, make sure that your plan is supporting whatever you're going after funding for. Question 6 is all about mobility, because it's a ITD program and their motto is your safety, your mobility, your economic opportunity. We do have a question on each of those areas. So what we're looking for in the mobility question is, are you closing a gap in the system? The picture on the left is from the city of Nampa. This is a great example of filling a gap. They had multiple miles of pathway along Indian Creek on one side of this neighborhood, and then had several miles of pathway on the other side of the neighborhood going into downtown, but there was no connection. And users had to get off the pathway, go through the neighborhood where there were no sidewalks, and walk in the road to get to the connection on the other side. So this project that just was constructed this summer was only a couple hundred feet, but closed the gap and was able to have a continuous stretch from downtown to other parts of town. So scores are really looking for gaps in the system. And how is this project going to increase the number of users? Question 7 is all about safety. And like I said, with child ped safety, doesn't mean you have to have crashes. If you want to pull the crash map on our LTAC website, that definitely can be used to support your project, but that isn't the only thing that we're going to look for. Take pictures, talk to school districts, discuss with your police, get some speeds, stand out there on the corner and take pictures of people using the shoulder. I know there was one application from the city of Cambridge a couple cycles ago where they had a guy in his mobility chair in his veteran's hat, driving down the edge line with cars going around him. So sometimes a picture can go a long way toward describing how this will improve safety. If you're just doing a pathway, go ahead and add some signs for safety, some speed flashback signs, some RFBs. That can be easy ways to increase your points on this question and make your project more competitive. Question 8 is about economic opportunity. If you filled out this application in the past, you'll remember there was 9 different checkboxes. How are you connecting commercial to commercial, or commercial to residential, or schools to residential? And it was pretty complicated and skewed the scores a lot, I think. So we removed that, and it's now more or less a narrative. How are you going to improve the economic opportunity in your community through, half a page? If you want to include a map because it helps you support your narrative, that's fine. I include a picture of the city of Cuna's application map from the past. The green box in the middle shows the project area, and then it just really clearly makes us understand all the different connections that project will be able to connect to. Question 9 is brand new. ITD has really been working on their compliance for ADA facilities, and they've doubled the amount of funding they spend internally on improving curb ramps. So because of that, because this is the only program that funds, pedestrian and bike facilities, they're trying to tie these 2 programs together. So if you're going to be improving the ADA compliance within a curb ramp or in a sidewalk, then you're going to get some bonus points for this. The Comment period is closed at this point. It closed on October 18th, but they do have a new ADA transition plan that is on their website. You can look at it. They've got a great story map on how they're going to be spending the money that they have had in the past, but how they're going to be using it better to bring their compliance quicker on the state system. And finally, question 10 is letters of support. Something new this year is we heard from our MPOs that they felt left out in this program and they weren't being notified when projects were being added to the ITIP within their boundaries. So of your 5 letters of support, one of them must be from the MPO if you're adding a project within an MPO boundary. And that's where they're just looking to have a conversation with you. You know, are you putting in bike paths in an area that makes the most sense? You know, does your transportation plan support it? Does the regional plan support it? So work with your MPOs if you're working on a project within their boundaries. There's a couple other attachments other than the 10 questions. One of them is the estimate. It is a fillable form that's linked on our website. So if you put in your construction amount, it will automatically calculate the 7.34%. In the past, agencies thought that if they put in a 10% match, then it would show to scores that they're really excited about this project and they really want it. And what we want to communicate with you is this is not scored. Putting in overmatch does not help you. In fact, it really confuses ITD through every step of the reimbursement process and has caused way more problems than benefits. So we're telling everyone a standard 7.34% match. Also, we don't score how much you're asking for. So if you think your project is going to cost $400,000, ask for $500,000. Or if it's a $150,000 project, give yourself a buffer. You know, we don't need you to be exact, and it's hard to predict in 3 years how much construction is going to cost. You know, everything is so unpredictable right now with supply. You know, who knew 2 years ago that costs would be like they are today? So the first line on this estimate is your construction estimate, and you'll see that the second line is a 20% contingency. So we already tell you, put a contingency on it. Give yourself time and space and money. There's no penalty for giving money back. If you're able to build your whole project, you'll have the option whether you want to extend your project or give money back. And it's much easier to do that than it is to try to find additional funding later. There's no in-kind match allowed on this program. That's not new. That's always been the case for TAP, but you can still do the design in-house and you can still help augment construction inspection to reduce the cost of those so that you can spend more on construction. The only thing I will say with designing in-house, if you have your own city or staff engineer, is just be wary of movements within your agencies. You know, we had a project with the city of Victor where they had their city engineer on board to do the design, and then he left the city and went to work for a consultant. And the city, their choice was to either delay the project a year and have time to hire an engineer with just reduce the amount of money they had for construction. But what they decided to do was hire that engineer back on a separate contract and have him work nights and weekends and get the project designed because they were really excited about their construction and wanted it built this summer and didn't want to have to wait. So just something to be aware of if you are doing the design in-house. So this is one of the attachments. A second attachment is your schedule. It's very high level. You'll see that it's set up in quarters. So we're just looking to see, do you want design in year 1 and construction in year 2? Or do you want design in year 2, construction year 3? And if you're applying for construction only, just skip the top half of this form and only fill out the bottom half. With additional funding from the federal government, depending on when we get the new transportation bill, the funding for this program will increase starting this fiscal year, in fiscal year 22. So we'll be definitely looking for some construction only projects that we can fill this year and advertise for construction this summer. Just depends on when that federal transportation bill gets funded. Finally, there's 2 forms that are due 1 week before the application. And these are the environmental screening and the project checklist. If you, again, just like the right-of-way form, if you already filled out this environmental screening for a previous application, this form hasn't changed. We assume there's no new endangered species from the last time. We'll still do a once over and re-sign it, but you can probably resubmit the same one you had used in a previous application. And we're just helping you look for anything environmentally that you might not be aware of, like wetlands or historic buildings, or, there's historic riprap, the list goes on. So this is where we help notify you of these things before the application is due, because often these have implications to schedule and to cost. The other form is a pre-application checklist. The ITD districts are happy to do this on site with you if you do a site visit, or I will do it with you over the phone. I just want an opportunity to talk with you about what you're doing with your project, or where is it going, and do you have logical termini? These are not scored, but it's just our opportunity to discuss the project with you and make sure that you're on board with everything that's required for a TAP project. We will take these anytime. You do not have to wait until 1 week before the application. If you get started and you want to submit it to me in December, that is awesome. I will have a lot more time in December than the 50 of them that I'm going to get the week before the application. So if you want to work with me and have more of my time, then please reach out to me soon. I spent 45 minutes on the phone yesterday with the city of Ammon, going over their project and giving feedback and recommendations. So the sooner the better is all I'm saying on this piece. Finally, the applications are due electronically Thursday, January 20th. We will be hosting a webinar in the spring for all the agencies that do get funding, just letting you know, when are you going to hear from us again? What are your next steps? When do you need to start saving for match? Just trying to answer any of those questions that are a little bit more specific for those who do get a grant funded. And finally, non-infrastructure application will be on our website soon. It should be probably early November, and that will also have the same January 20th deadline. Do I have any questions in the TAP or child ped safety? I don't see chat, so is there anything?
No.
Okay. All right, so feel free to give me a call or email me as you're working on your applications. Other than that, we're going to take a 5-minute break and come back at 10:25 for discussions about, what's it, safety.
Okay, we're gonna get started again. Starting my video. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. I couldn't figure out how to make the slide change. Okay, my name is Brian Wright. I'm going to talk about the Local Highway Safety Improvement Program, also known as the LSIP. On this slide, you'll see an example of a recent LSIP project that was in the city of Idaho Falls. The safety improvement here was a regrading of the super elevation on this curve to reduce slide-offs. So we rebuilt the entire road, and in the background, you can see it was also at a rail crossing. And as part of that project, we also repaved and restriped the road and rebuilt it. So I have another example here, just like to keep examples so you can see what we do. I'm trying to change the slide, apologies. Okay, the LSIP program is part of a component of the HSIP program. When ITD spends money, it's called HSIP. There's about $17 million annually allocated to safety in the state, and of that we get about 50% for the local system. So it goes around $8.9 million. The entire goal of this program is to eliminate serious and fatal injury type crashes. That is it. It's data driven. There are no points for descriptions or displays, even though they're very helpful in helping us understand what you'd like to do. We just go by crashes and treatments. So any local roadway is eligible for an LSIP project, even a residential road, local roads. It doesn't have to just be RTOs and collectors. This application is electronic submittals only, and it's due January 19th, 2022. Okay, so these tables are to show you some of the crash breakdown on the local and state system. Also, you notice the years 2016 through 2020 are the 5-year window covered by this application cycle. So each year of applications covers a rolling 5-year window, and this year's application covers 2016 to 2020. So the top chart shows you the fatal and serious injury crashes on the local system. The middle one shows you all crashes on all systems. And then the bottom one shows you the percentage breakdown. And if you average those fatal and serious injury crashes, you would get about 50%. And that's where we got the agreed upon funding split with ITD. I'd also like to point out that this chart counts fatal crashes and serious injury crashes, not the amount of people injured in those crashes. So there were 188 fatal crashes last year in the state, and there were 214 fatalities in those crashes. That's the convention we use, and that's the way you'll use it when you fill out a safety application. It's per crash. Okay, a couple recent changes to the program. I left the ones from last year up since we didn't do the in-person workshops. Each jurisdiction is limited to $1.5 million in the LSIP program each year. We did that to make sure that we can get enough money to do multiple projects per year around the state, and that 1.5 million should cover the largest type safety improvement, which is a signal or a roundabout. That includes engineering, construction, and CE&I in that $1.5 million. Also, the service life for any improvement cannot exceed 20 years. While things may last longer, it affects the way the scores go, so we capped everything at 20 years. New this year, local in-kind work will not be allowed was cash match. It's more consistent with a lot of our other programs. It's not a very popular option anyways, but we just wanted to be more consistent across the board. Another example project here is a mini roundabout in the city of Middleton, done within the existing right-of-way, so smaller, and it has a traversable center for a large truck that goes through in case they can't make that turn and drive right over it. It's another example. Okay, here's a chart of where the LSIP dollars have gone since LHTAC started with the program in 2014. You can see it varies throughout the state, and some of that is based on activity. It's probably not an even split for population based, but that's just where they go. We work with many different engineering firms, both in design and construction, and a lot of locals in this program. It's a very popular program, so I'll give you an overview of it. Okay, where can you find out more information about this? LHTAC's website, up at the top, programs, and then down on the right, LSIP. Under that, you'll see a link to a couple places that can help you with this application, including the application and all the backup information, as well as our crash map online. That crash map will show you where all documented accidents happen, fatal, serious injury, and all the other less minor ones or less significant ones. It'd be helpful if you can include that in your application, but we'll go look it up as well just to verify that it's an eligible crash. So the program is to eliminate fatal and serious injury crashes, and you've got to do something to reduce the future likelihood of that crashes. And that's the modification factor. So this is the website where you can find most of the modification factors that you'll use in your application. I'll take you through a quick example. I typed intersection here in the search bar, and here's what came up. So these are some of the treatments you can do at an intersection to reduce the likelihood of future crashes. You can see there's a lot of options. You definitely want to pick one that's relevant to the type of accident that you had. So if it was a pedestrian or a bicycle, then I would look under that category and not propose something that's not related. That's something we will check when we look at the applications. So in this example, I clicked on this delineation, and there's one subcategory for pavement markings. Okay, so under pavement markings, you see these are all different. Oh, it's covering the thing. I can't see it, but it says lane markings, I think something like that, and direction arrows. So these would be mostly your right turn arrows, through arrows, edge line markings, stop bars, ladder crosswalks, center line, things that help channelize traffic through the intersection. And you can see there's several different ones, and they apply to different kinds of crash severities and area types, rural and urban. These are all rural. So the number you're looking for is this crash reduction factor, and that'll come into play in the application. So pick the highest one that applies to the crash you're trying to address. Okay. So here's the application. You can see on top, it says FY 2024. That is the target construction year for this application cycle. That should allow us enough time to design next year and construct in 2024. That can move around, but we will talk with each person individually when that happens. So line 1 of the application asks, is your improvement a systemic improvement? These are highly encouraged by the feds. They have a lot of benefit for the dollars typically. An example would be some kind of improvement at a two-way stop intersection. So if you have an accident at a two-way stop and you want to put in flashing stop signs and maybe some edge line warning, rumble strips, something, that would be a great safety improvement. If you have several other intersections that look just like that, then let's do it to all of them. Let's do it to 30. That's a systemic improvement. We're going to do an improvement where a crash has not happened yet, but the conditions are present for it to happen. So the example on this application of the countermeasure, the improvement to reduce crashes, is to install a raised median. You can see it has a crash reduction factor of 25% and a service life of 10 years. We do look at service lives and try and be consistent. For something that sits in the road and gets run over, plowed, is out in the salt and freezing, we would say 10 years is probably a reasonable service life for that improvement. And then the cost, $45,000. So all three of those items go into a formula, and that's how we get your cost benefit ratio. And that is the sole basis of how these projects are awarded. Your crash reduction factor is capped at 60%. So in this application, I would add another improvement. And that may be something like install signs, pavement markings, or whatever, anything you need to do to get up to 60%. Then you've done the best you can as far as reduction. So definitely don't go under that if at all possible. Here's an estimate that you'll have to submit with your application. This is to show you that we do review these estimates and make changes when appropriate. It's usually up. The whole goal here is to make sure that when we try and build this in 2024, that you get what you were applying for, protected in the future with all the federal aid burdens that come with it. So you can see this one has a 30% contingency on line 17. Based on what we've been seeing in bids recently, that's probably somewhere around the minimum you'd want to put in there, because we just don't know until we start designing these projects. But it's best to be very conservative here so we can get this improvement when it comes time to bid it and build it. Okay, so once again, the deadline for the applications is January 19th next year at 4 p.m. Mountain, electronic submittals only to that email address, applications@ltac.org. Does anyone have any questions? Yeah, I'll make this bigger. Okay, moving on. Scott says there's no questions. As you can tell, I'm really good at Zoom. Painfully obvious. Okay. The next thing I'm gonna talk about is technical assistance. It's in our name. We do a lot of that in many different areas. Layla mentioned earlier, we have a lot of engineers on staff with different backgrounds. We all know something about unique aspects of engineering. So whatever question you have, we'll try our best to answer it. We get a lot of MUTCD questions from locals. One area that I'm particularly involved in is the traffic counting. I don't know if anyone here has used any of our traffic counters, but that's what we're going to talk about. Okay, traffic counters. So you have two basic types of counters that LTAC has access to, which is the radar counter, the black box there hanging on the telephone pole. That counts cars as they pass through the radar field in front of it. Or tube counters, which is your picture on your right. Tubes taped to the road counts cars as the tubes are run over and hit. So for the radar counters, we have 5 sets available for use throughout the state. Each set has 4 radars and 1 computer with the software you need to set up a counter and run some reports. Right now, the sets are dispersed throughout the state, and we like to keep them that way, local to local if possible, without ever really coming back to LTAC unless they need service or something's wrong. If you want to do a count for longer than 2 days, which is your typical engineering minimum 2 peak count, you're best served to set up a solar panel so you don't have to change the battery. Every time you change the battery, it does create a new count file. It's much easier to take the time to set up the panel, get a longer continuous count file. It's useful. And I encourage people to take longer counts when possible, 7 days, 14 days, whatever you think you need to really get an accurate capture of what's going on out there. The radars excel at speed and volume. And based on my experience talking to a lot of locals, that's exactly what they're interested in. The 85th percentile speed, especially if they've gotten a question from a local or an elected official about the speed limit on a segment of road. And then volume is good for making planning decisions. And I think some of our applications ask for your ADT, but it's not a scored criteria that I'm aware of. The great thing about the radars, we can set them up outside of the traveled way. We did some counting on 55 near Cascade with ITD's permission, of course. And it was great not having to stand in the road because it was the middle of the day on a weekday and it was still pretty busy and the cars were going really fast. It would have been not possible to set up tubes out there, I would say, under those conditions. We're available for support, myself or Rebecca Howell, if you've ever worked with her, throughout the state by phone for sure. And if we're in the local area, we will come out and help. So let us know if you need anything with those. Here's an example report from the program. This is a speed report from the city of Cascade. So this count was done on Lake Cascade Parkway, which is in between 55 and the lake, Highway 55. The posted speed limit on that road is 25 miles an hour. The 85th percentile speed was 41 miles an hour. So people are definitely in a hurry to get to the lake. You could use this report to defend the existing speed limit or justify raising the speed limit. It really depends on what you want. There's a lot of components that go into speed limits, not just the 85th percentile speed. Okay, same road. This is the volume report for that same count. There was an ADT of 2,030 vehicles a day. And these highlights here in the report are showing you the peak hours. That would be good. Most of it lines up with what you know, but for enforcement reasons and stuff, you could look at when is the best time to get law enforcement out there to look for speeders, write tickets, etc. Okay, tube counters. LTAC has tube counters, and I've never set one up. So tube counters are really great at axle classification. I just had a phone call yesterday with someone asking about axle or classification with the radars, and the answer I had to give them was not great. But what they wanted, they could have gotten from a tube counter. But I have not had a lot of people really be interested in an axle classification. Most times speed and volume is plenty good for what they're looking for. The drawbacks here with the tubes, you have to set them up in the traveled way. I don't have much, if any, experience with them, but I could figure it out if you need help with them. So that's going to be it for tube counters. We have them. Let me know if you would like to know more about them. Okay, so where can you find out more information about this? LTAC's main page, up at the top, resources, down at the right, loaner equipment. So there you'll find more information about the radars as well as some other loaner equipment we have. We have a speed gun, a laser speed gun, if you want to borrow that for any reason or need to. Any questions about radar counters? Nothing? I'll give it a minute. Sorry, I just looked at Scott for what I'm looking at. Okay. We're going to move on. Oh, there's the contact information. Like I said, myself or Rebecca Howell, if you'd like to get on the schedule or see, when the soonest time we can get you a set of radar counters is, please contact us. Okay, my last topic here is 129 permitting. This is not an area I'm super involved in. Kevin Kuther is involved a lot in this, but I'm going to stand in and give this presentation. Okay, so LTAC's position is to encourage the locals to opt into the permitting program, which allows ITD to issue an overweight permit on an approved route in your local system. Many local routes originate or terminate on the local system, so we think it's good to stay involved and give the shippers an ability to do business the way they want to do, following some guidelines established by the local. Locals have the best knowledge of where the trips originate, where they terminate, and where's a good place for the trucks to go. No one's going to know that like you, the turns they can make, the turns that are safe through your town or jurisdiction. So we like to have you involved and input on the decision for those routes. We also want to be good partners, and we're just trying to make sure everyone's working together to get the best possible outcome for everyone. If you receive a route request from a shipper, you have 150 days to make a determination on that route by code. That determination has to be approved by your governing body, resolution, or ordinance. And we'll get into how a little bit more that works. So here's the code that covers the Local Technical Analysis Fund, which is a fund available to help locals when they receive a route request and they don't know the answer for that road. The fund makes up to $10,000 available for you to analyze that route and make a determination for the requester. So this fund is supported by a $5 fee that either you or ITD collects, depending on who's issuing the permit, for every load over 105.5. If you're collecting that fee then monthly, you're supposed to aggregate those and send them to ITD. That is how this fund is supported, and so far it's been sufficient to keep it full, if you will. If you have opted in to allow ITD to issue the permits, they will collect the $5 on your behalf. As a local, you're also allowed to charge up to $50 to cover your own administrative costs for issuing permits, but you don't have to charge anything if that's how you want to do it. So it's important to note that you still have authority over your local roadways. You can designate, deny routes through your jurisdiction. But again, LTAC's position is to encourage you to provide a way through. It doesn't have to be every road that is in your jurisdiction, but a way through your jurisdiction. It's probably the best option to be a good partner with everyone else involved in this. Here's the stats of who has opted in, meaning ITD can issue the permit, and who hasn't, as of the date the slide was created. Okay, so here's the Technical Analysis Fund. It's capped at $150,000. That's just the legislative language. It just can't go above that because that's how the law was written. We spent about $80,000 to date helping locals get an engineer and analyze these routes, and they typically cost $8,000 to $10,000. If you want to use the Technical Analysis Fund, please contact us and we can get that going and get you set up with an engineer to analyze the routes. LTAC does represent the local interest. That is our role in this. Trying to make it work the way it is currently structured with the permitting. all I'm gonna say on that. Okay, this slide is to show you that currently the legal limit is different on the local route compared to the state route by code, but the length limit is the same. So already on a local route, they can go up to 105.5, whereas a state route that would require a permit from ITD. So it's not impossible to imagine that local route limit being changed to 129 if this current system does not work well enough. That's just the point I want to make on that slide. So where can you find out more about this? I'm going to start at LHTAC's main page again, resources. You can't see it because it's too far up on the screen, and down on the right, trucking. There's a lot of resources there to help you through this. And of course, we have a Kevin Kuther who knows a lot about it. If you have any questions, please contact him for help. Any questions on trucking that I can answer right now? Guess we're good. See Scott walking in the back. Okay, no more questions. I will hand it over to Scott to talk about bridges.
Okay, I'm back. Right now, I want to talk about some other technical assistance we have to offer here at LHTAC, and that is bridge technical assistance. As I mentioned to you before, a FHWA defines a bridge as a structure over 20 feet in length. However, for terms of these bridge technical assistance, we will offer bridge technical assistance to any bridges of any length. So just keep that in mind as we go through these slides. I'm going to start off by talking about bridge inspection. All bridges in the state of Idaho are inspected by ITD. This includes all bridges on the local system. ITD inventories all the bridges, inspects them, and load rates them for the entire state and reports that to FHWA. Most of the bridge inspections for the local bridges are done by consultants. So depending on your area, you may have a certain consultant that will inspect that area for several years. So you may get to know them pretty well. LHTAC receives about $9 million for bridges every year. ITD takes about $2 million of that back every year for this inspection and load rating program. So we try to keep the good bridges good and the bad bridges bad keep the good bridges good and replace the bad bridges. We don't want to keep the bad bridges bad. Typically, the bridges are inspected every 2 years, but the bad bridges are done every year. So we do want to replace those bad bridges because it can be quite expensive to inspect these bridges. The inspection reports are done soon after the inspection, and then they're given to ITD from the inspectors, and then ITD goes through a QA/QC process. After they go through that process, the locals will receive a copy of that inspection report. If you're interested in meeting an inspector out on your bridge site, please let me or ITD know, and we can certainly help you set that up. They try to go about the same time every other year. So if you look at an inspection report and they were out there in June, pretty typical, 2 years later, they'll be back out there that following June. So just let me know, we can certainly try to set that up. Speaking of inspection reports, an inspection report's typically about 6 to 7 pages long. A lot of the information is just regurgitated. Things will be highlighted that change from year to year, so they kind of stand out from that. One area I do want to point out is, hopefully you can see my cursor down here on maintenance recommendations. The sponsors need to take particular attention to. The inspectors, when they're out there, they do look at things that need to be repaired or maintenance recommendations, and they give them a priority of low, medium, high. So sometimes you need to go out there, you need to fix some scour, or you need to clean off your bridge deck, and a lot of the inspectors are very good at noticing these things. They see these things all the time, and they know what deteriorates a bridge and what causes bridges to prematurely fail. So these are some good things to take care of as soon as you can. We get about 24 posting notices a year in this state. A lot of times the local will just receive a letter or an email stating their bridge needs to be posted for loads or it needs to be updated, typically reduced, sometimes increase in posting. The letter doesn't have a lot of information as to why this change occurred. So if you need any help with that, please let me know. They do everything they can to not post bridges or to make the posting as high as possible. There's just a lot of things that go into a posting on a bridge. It can be what we call a load rating analysis. I kind of call it a reverse engineering, where they'll take an existing bridge and kind of try to determine what the actual carrying capacity of that is, because it's never really been analyzed. ITD about 10 years ago, well, maybe a little longer than that, it was determined that many of the bridges in the state had not been load rated, or had been a long time since they've been load rated. So you may receive a posting notice in the mail for a bridge that's been in service for 50 years and really not know why it's being posted. So if you have any questions on those, please give me a call. I get the same letter in the mail as you will. So we have helped try to increase or remove postings. It's kind of a hard thing to do. Some things you can do to try to increase or remove a posting or to do material tests, such as testing the actual steel on the bridge if it's a steel girder bridge. We have done some lane striping in the past to try to kind of squeeze in the trucks to stay more toward the center of the bridge. Sometimes that can help. You can do an actual load test. That can get quite expensive though. So we don't really push that, and we'd have to have some special testing companies come in and do that. So it's kind of expensive. But one of the easiest things we can do is to actually just suggest repairs on your bridge. If something is damaged or deteriorated, go in, we'll fix that repair, maybe increase the condition factor, and maybe increase the load posting on the bridge. One really popular thing to do to increase the load posting is to remove some wearing surface. Sometimes you can get a large amount of buildup of gravel or asphalt wearing surface on the bridge. And sometimes just removing, just a few inches of that can take quite a bit of load off a bridge and really help a load rating and help your posting. I've spoken a little bit about bridge load rating. I want to touch on it a little bit here. This is kind of your reverse engineering. Like I said, about 10 plus years ago, ITD got asked by the feds to keep their load ratings up to date on all their bridges within their inventory, which included the local bridges. And this really came about from the Minneapolis bridge collapse that happened on I-35. The feds went back and determined that a lot of bridges in the state may not have had plans or may not actually know the load carrying capacity of a bridge. So the state has gone through and tried to load rate every single bridge in the state. And like I said, there's about 4,500 bridges in the state. To do a bridge load rating takes on average about 20 to 30 hours a bridge. So it is quite a time consuming process to sort of reverse engineer these bridges to determine how much load they can carry. Believe it or not, a lot of bridges in this state, we don't have any plans for. So sometimes we don't even know what these bridges are made of. And a lot of times these postings and these load ratings will be based off what we call engineering judgment load ratings. So it's just based on the condition of the bridge alone. So, a lot of times if we can increase that condition, we can increase the posting as well. So a lot of times the bridges will also be posted engineering judgment just based on scour. It's hard to sort of engineer or put numbers to how much capacity a bridge can hold because of scour under the foundation. So a lot of times ITD will just say, well, we're just going to reduce it to 50% of the legal loads, and that's what the posting will be. I'll touch a bit on scour later, but it's important that we get these scour issues fixed up. Brian touched a bit on 129 routes. As part of our bridge technical assistance, we do help out with the 129 routes. There are 4 conditions to be checked for a 129 route. There's off-tracking, pavement, and crash safety. One of the 4 is also bridges and culverts. Can the bridge actually support a 129 load? So ITD and me at LHTAC will help gather that information to help you determine if you can support a 129 route bridge. I will go in and pull inspection reports, and if there's no load rating and an inspection report. If there's no information on the load rating available, I will call ITD and have them move up that load rating up to the top of the list if it is available. And we'll try to get that done as soon as possible. Like I said, the load ratings take about 20 to 30 hours of bridge. That can run anywhere between $4,000 and $5,000 per bridge. And as Brian mentioned, you only get about $10,000 for a 129 route. So you can see it can take a big chunk off if you really needed to do a load rating on a bridge. Also, the load ratings are typically only done for bridges over 20 feet in length. If you do have shorter bridges that you are concerned about, let me know and we can also evaluate that one for you too. We have come up with some bridge priority lists for some jurisdictions. Some jurisdictions have dozens, if not 50 or so bridges, or maybe even more bridges, and they just don't know where to start. They just don't know what needs to be done. They don't know their inventory. Luckily, ITD keeps a great database of all the bridges that are over 20 feet. So we can help kind of prioritize your bridges, provide you with the list, kind of summarize where they fall into your conditions or your priorities. And, we can meet with you and talk about what needs to be done with your bridges, what needs to be fixed first. We can look at ADTs, how much they're used, how deteriorated they are. We can help you provide guidance on grant opportunities. If you wanted to apply for a bridge grant, what bridges should you apply for? So just let us know if you would like that done as well. We've been really pushing on bridge preservation and maintenance. We can certainly generate a list of local bridges and suggest maintenance recommendations. One of the easiest things you can do is, as the picture shows there, is just to wash off the bridge deck. A lot of times you'll get debris built up on the bridge deck and it'll trap water and the salts, and that just rapidly deteriorates your deck. Make sure the water drains off your bridge correctly, doesn't cause additional erosion around the abutments. Also fix any scour issues you may find. Once a hole starts to develop under a foundation, it just grows exponentially. We can also help you suggest regular maintenance intervals and also help you suggest repairs and whether those repairs can be done by your local forces or do you need to hire a contractor to do those. I talked a lot about scour and I'm going to talk about it more here because scour is by far the #1 cause of the bridge failures in the nation. It accounts for over 50% of bridge failures. And believe it or not, a lot of our local bridges here in the state are not designed for scour. They're not designed for flooding conditions. It may have been an old farm road at one point that's just eventually turned into a highway at some point. So many of our local bridges are not designed with scour in mind. So we really push the scour issue, and so does FHWA and ITD. How can we help with scour and hydraulics? Well, we can review your inspection report with you, help you determine if it's scour critical. The inspection report has a lot of good information typically. A lot of the smaller bridges, though, the inspectors aren't doing underwater inspections like they would on the larger bridges. They're just kind of poking holes around underneath your foundation. So if you ever notice that the water is completely gone or very low, it's good to go out there and just look and just feel around underneath your existing foundation to determine if you think you have any scour holes. If you do, let us know, let ITD know, let the inspector know. We can probe around a little bit more. And if you are constructing a new bridge, if you are planning on putting a new bridge in, I strongly encourage you to get a hydraulic report with each new bridge. A lot of times, these bridges you'll just match the same length or you'll just go outside ordinary high water and think you have a bridge long enough. Really, these things need to be designed for flooding conditions in mind so they don't have a sudden failure. So please keep that in mind when you're doing a new bridges. There's a lot of guidance on ITD, or you can call me and I can help as well. We also have a recorded scour presentation online, which I'll get to later. Another thing we can do is help plan reviews. I know a lot of bridges in the state aren't done through LHTAC or aren't done through LTD. They're just done with your local funds. We can provide third-party reviews on those as well, because once these bridges are on public roads, they do need to be inventoried by the state. And they also need to be inspected and load rated within 180 days. So what we can do for you, we can take your plans if it's done from some firm that not used to doing ITD work or is not local, we can check those plans for completeness, constructability, help you review specifications. Of course, we really want to review a hydraulics and scour report, help you review the cost estimate as well. We can also get that into the local system to be load rated. As I said, these need to be inspected and load rated within 180 days of opening. So this goes to all the locals online, or even if you're a consultant online. If you are doing a new bridge, please let me know. I'll try to get that scheduled for your initial inspection and load rating. We can help you with cost estimating, cost estimates for engineering, design, construction, and we can help you look at the schedule and time. One thing always is, how long would it take to close the bridge? We can help you with repair or replacement comparisons if you're wondering if you just need to repair the bridge or is it just time to replace it. We also help with cost estimates for applications. I mentioned our bridge applications from the Fed Aid program. We can help you with those applications. There are some guidance in there, but we can certainly help fine tune those numbers as well. And this is one of my favorites, environmental and permitting. I would say the vast majority of local bridges in the state are over waterways. And when you're over water, there are a lot of environmental and considerations and permits that need to be applied. And this is just a brief touch on some things. Some things you need to consider from the Idaho Department of Water Resources. The big one usually is the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers 404 permit. IDL has a lot to do with recreation lands, and they only have certain rivers that are regulated by IDL, but it's always good to check with them as well. And then for a lot of the canal work, if it's not a canal district, it's typically governed by the Bureau of Reclamation. Luckily here at LHTAC, we have two great environmental people. They keep track of all this. It's constantly changing. The laws are always changing. So, make sure you get all the permits you need before doing any work, any in-water work for bridges or any other structures you may be doing in the water. Chris and Joellen and our group are great at keeping track of all these. And really, it's not as bad when you're doing a non-federal aid project. They go pretty straightforward. So. As part of our bridge technical assistance, we also help out with the emergency repair. Layla talked about emergency repair earlier. A lot of times, bridges fail not due to an emergency, but an ongoing maintenance issue. Those do not qualify for emergency repair. As Layla talked about that earlier. So, we look at the inspection reports. If it's a long-term maintenance issue, it's typically not going to be funded for emergency repair. If it's a sudden damage, fire, flood, hit or damage barrier, unknown deterioration that's not mentioned in inspection reports, sometimes those can qualify. And I have helped some jurisdictions gather some information to state their case to the council to help get emergency repair money for their bridge structures. So if you think you might have an emergency repair on a bridge, you can let me know and I can help you look through that and help you determine if you should apply for an application or not. Another thing, a lot of people don't see what we do are additional grant applications through the FHWA or through the federal government. We do apply for grants for the local highway jurisdictions. One we recently, kind of in the middle of, but wrapping up the design of, is our competitive highway bridge program grant, where we bundled 8 bridges together in one design contract and into 2 separate construction projects. So each construction project will have 4. And the point of this grant was to see if we could save money by bundling bridges together. So we've got one package out to bid, so fingers crossed we do see some money savings on that. Another one we just applied for was the A demo grant, where we applied to do an ultra high performance concrete overlay on the bridge. A lot of these grants, though, you won't hear about specifically because we are pretty particular in what bridges we do select for these grants. The bridges typically need to fit under a certain category, a certain deterioration, certain condition, if you will. So we typically see these grants, we look at our list of bridges in the state, and then we'll call the local jurisdiction to see if they want to participate in that. Another grant that we do have right now is the State Transportation Innovation Council, the state grant, which I'll talk about later. We have provided some training in the past for bridges. Two recently we had during COVID that we were able to do online was an introduction to bridge scour. It's about an hour and a half long. It goes through some basic stuff in addition to some more technical stuff. So it's a very good presentation. I highly encourage you to see it. You can get to it through our website. In addition, we have a big push for doing GRS, IBS abutment systems for bridges. Boundary County, and with the help of HMH, recently replaced a bridge up in Boundary County using their own forces. So that was an interesting presentation. We talk a little bit about GRS, IBS bridges and go through a lot of pictures of their construction and their experiences with that. Like I said, both these are on our YouTube channel, which can be found on our website. And also, Layla will talk about this later. Please sign up for our email notifications and if you want any information on upcoming trainings. Speaking of which, one which won't be online is our state grant I talked about earlier. This is our bridge preservation and maintenance workshop, where we received this grant pre-COVID. We really wanted this to be an in-person training because we want about a half day of classroom training with a half day of field training. So we're gearing up to give this training, hopefully in the spring. We're going to be talking about inspection reports, deck conditions, preservation, and information on routine maintenance. So as part of the grant, the travel and per diem would be covered by the grant. We're still trying to figure out the location of this. So again, sign up for our emails to be notified about this. And with that, okay, there it goes. Are there any questions out there? If you do have any questions, ask them now in the chat. If not, feel free to call me or Amanda. And our numbers they're listed, but everybody's is the same. Do you have any questions? No questions? If not, I will hand it over to Layla to finish off our presentation today.
Okay, moving on to a couple programs that we don't administer, but that we provide support for or are part of the team. The first is FLAP, Federal Lands Access Program. This program is administered by Western Federal Lands. The goal of the funding is to provide safe and adequate transportation to and through federal lands. The FLAP Programming Decision Committee, which you can see on the screen, is made up of Kristen Austin with Federal Highway, Blake Rindlisbacher with ITD, and then myself, representing the locals in LHTAC. There's also a technical advisory group, and Dan Kuntz represents us on the technical advisory group. If you're interested in applying for funding for FLAP, I'd recommend contacting Dan to help with your application. You need to have sign off from the federal agency that you will be working with on the application, and Dan can help with that as well as the overall application composition. The application itself, like other LHTAC applications that we're a part of, is available on our website. It is different than applications that we are responsible for. There are quite a few forms that need to be completed as part of the application process, including, like I mentioned, that coordination with the federal agency. There is quite a bit of money available in this program, and they fund 2 years at a time. The maximum application size can be projects up to $10 million, but please remember that match is part of that. So you will need to pay the 7.34% match as with other federal programs. This application is due December 17th. And as I mentioned, I would definitely recommend getting with Dan to talk about that. I spoke with the Western Federal Lands team yesterday, and they intend to get us a webinar that we can post on our website for application information. Some other opportunities that are not LHTAC administered, ITD is accepting applications for the freight program this year. To be eligible for freight money, you must be on the critical freight corridor map for the state. This year, for the program funding, ITD will be accepting applications, deciding which projects to fund, and then adding those corridors onto the freight map. Kevin Kuther in our office and Scott Lukengay, the ITD freight manager, recorded a webinar a couple weeks ago that is now on our website. The webinar itself is about 15 minutes, and then there's 15 minutes or so of questions. I would encourage you to review that webinar or contact Kevin regarding the freight program. We also shared information recently on a FEMA program. Any programs that we receive information on, we send emails out pretty quickly. So please, again, another plug to subscribe to our emails. Another one that's available right now is the Idaho Department of Parks and Rec funding. This is a lot of funding for not cars, once again, ATVs, snowmobiles, boat ramps, pathways, etc. They have changed their training for that program to webinars as well. So I'd recommend looking there. Again, we have a link on our website for all funding that is non-LTAC related. Moving to the T2 program, this is the training arm of LTAC. We have training classes offered 9 to 10 months a year now, maybe this year even 12 months with webinars that we're able to offer. The classes we're offering are now both in-person and virtual, which is a big change from the past. We were almost all in person. Last year, we were almost all virtual. So now we have that hybrid makeup. The classes are related to safety, professional development, and then the largest amount of classes are construction and maintenance techniques. We have 2 levels of recognition within the T2 program, the Road Scholar and the Roadmaster program. When your employees complete the programs, we will come and present them their awards at your council or commission meeting. You can see that's what the picture is there with the guys. The Road Scholar and Roadmaster classes, the main chunk of the T2 classes are really aimed at local roadway employees. However, we have begun a leadership program that's for anyone in your organization. We have a lot of clerks participating, and we will be rolling out the next few classes for that this upcoming year. The T2 Center is partially funded by federal funds. About half of the base funding comes from federal money and the other half is matched by the state. So we do have quite a bit of coordination with Federal Highway. As Scott mentioned, the State Transportation Innovation Council earlier today, we do hold a seat on that group, the ISTIC. And with that, we've been able to secure quite a bit of funding for workshops. And those workshops, the funding for the workshops help cover the cost of the speakers or location, as well as your participation, your travel reimbursement for it. So we will continue to pursue funding for workshops through the STIC. As I've transitioned to the administrator role at LTAC, it has created an opening for the T2 director, and Dan Coons in our office is now serving as that. About half of his time will be going to managing the T2 center. Also, this past week, Lori Cover moved on to take on another role outside of LTAC. So Dan is a crew of 1 right now with the T2 Center. If you call and have T2 questions, he should be able to help you out. We accept applications every year for the Innovation Award. Really, the Innovation Award is a problem-solving award. We know lots of times throughout your agencies, some problems come up, your crews troubleshoot, problem solve, and then implement those solutions. And we just want to promote those and share those across the state, hopefully saving other jurisdictions time for that troubleshooting phase. The applications are normally due in May, June timeframe. And often we submit 1 or 2 applications to the National Build a Better Mousetrap competition that is administered by Federal Highway. This past year, we submitted an application from the Independent Highway District for their recessed pavement markings through the Build a Better Mousetrap competition, and they were awarded the National Pioneer Award for the nation. The schedule of classes is available on our website, and you can see there's quite a few still remaining. I think I counted yesterday, 17 or 18 classes still left this year at locations across the state, as well as webinars. We will continue doing a hybrid schedule in the near future with both in-person and virtual classes. We've also continued to share training opportunities from other T2 centers, as well as the Federal Highway Center for Local Aid Support. National partners have signed on with the Center for Local Aid Support to provide training for local roadway employees as well. And you see quite a bit of information from us on that. We try to send all of the virtual training for the upcoming week, once a week on Thursdays via email. The Safety Fest provide free safety training at locations across the state. Last year, all the Safety Fest worked together to provide one virtual event. This year, each Safety Fest is doing its own thing. We will continue to update our website with the different locations and their plans for training. For federal training opportunities, there's quite a few available this year. One, the ATSA Flagger certification is not free, but it is available online, and that is accepted in the state for the next year, that online certification. For free training, the American Public Works Association is offering the Click, Learn, and Click, Listen, and Learns for free to local roadway agency employees. Also, the National Highway Institute is signed on with the Center for Local Aid Support to make the majority of their classes free for local roadway employees, as well as the AASHTO Transportation Curriculum Coordination Council, the TC3. We have information on how to access that free training on our website. Each of them has their own login or code you need to enter to get that training for free. And then to our website, everything that we've discussed today, all the applications, the funding, the resources is all available on our website. This is the landing page. You can see there's two different links to the T2 Center. One is to register for classes, and then one is to receive or see that other information on schedule, as well as the federal online training partners. The programs tab has information on all the funding applications we've covered today. And then the resource tab is kind of the catch-all for everything else. The annual road and street financial information and updates will always be posted there. We have a tab for loaner equipment. So that would be the traffic counters that Brian mentioned, manuals that LHTAC has written and published, all of the different maps, the bridge map, the crash map, and the LHTAC project map. This presentation will be posted hopefully by the end of the day under the presentations tab, and then information of trucking. So really all that other information can be found under the resources tab. And again, I know it was mentioned to subscribe to our emails. This is really the best way to keep up to date on funding information, training information, project information that we are sending out. The bottom of our website is the link for the subscribe. It'll take you to the page on the right where you would enter who you are and who you work with. And then below that is what you're interested in. At the very least, I recommend clicking the funding tab so that when we do have these special programs or information on funding outside of LHTAC to share, we will share it through the email first, as well as information on the new federal bill and potentially new state money once the legislative session starts. So at least funding, and I'd encourage you to click on a few more tabs. Also at the bottom of our website is the staff link. If you click that, you can see all the different LHTAC staff programs they work for and contact information, including emails and then cell phone numbers for many. Again, we can all be reached at the basic LHTAC phone number. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. Again, you can put them in the chat or unmute if you'd like to ask a question. We're all here in the room, even though you can only see me, to answer any questions you may have. Okay, thank you all for giving us your time this morning. I hope that the workshop was valuable. We will be posting the recording on our website as well as the PowerPoint presentation for you to reference. Please feel free to call any of us here in the room that presented today or any other LHTAC staff, and we're happy to help. And again, thank you for your time.